Hello YouTube! Welcome to another video. And this time we're building a beautiful dining table from a single slab of sapelli, and it's a big one. In this clip you can see me using a router sled to get it completely flat. And this first step was a bit more challenging than usual, so let me just rewind and I'll explain a bit further. This one was already on the thinner side at just 50 millimeters thick, which is just under 2 inches. So already there wasn't that much I could remove, or it might be too thin to use. It had a moderate cup across the width, but right in the middle was a somewhat deep valley. Already I was getting a bit nervous. I had a pretty tight deadline, and this was the only slab to fit the client's desired dimensions of the final table, so I just couldn't afford any failures at this point. And here I'm just making sure everything is nice and dry. A big slab like this, you really need to take multiple measurements. A variance within a couple of percent it's usually pretty normal, I'd say. It might even have to do with density changes within the wood giving you a slightly different reading, but 6 to 8% or somewhere in that range is pretty good. And then it's just a matter of flipping it over and milling the underside also completely flat, and then we end up with our final thickness. And in this case it ended up being roughly 42 millimeters, which was actually more than I was hoping for, so I was pretty happy. And I would just rough cut it to length at this point. And just a funny little side note here, I've never worked with sapelli before, and let me just say, the sawdust, it smells wonderful. It's like a fresh batch of flowers or something. Usually I work with oak or ash, elm. They don't always smell that nice. Anyway, when this whole ordeal was done, I was just gonna move on to making the legs. And so now it's time for some metal working. I really hope these clips will make sense in a little while. My time was running short and my filming was a bit scattered. Anyhow, the legs are solid steel, and right now I'm putting a brass coating on these flat bars. It doesn't require much heat to get the brass to stick, so I'm just using a small torch to heat the steel. These are part of the legs. They will get welded to the main base and add a nice detail and contrast. And here I'm putting a beeswax linseed mix on the hot steel, just to bring out the color a little bit. And the curved parts were put through a rolling mill to achieve this nice radius. The client had requested the base to have the shape of a crescent moon, and together we came up with this final look. So there wasn't anything particularly difficult with this fabrication. It's just a matter of clamping these flat bars to the main bigger plate, and then just carefully tack welding everything. And once I was done, I could grind the welds down and make them flush with the bottom of the base. I would just make sure that they were evenly clamped and all the measurements were accurate where they were supposed to be, sort of. And overall, this design turned out very good. I'm very pleased with the look of it. Just how beautiful the color of the black oxide finish on the steel. I think it turned out pretty cool. Now, once the legs were done, I just set them aside and switched my focus back to the top itself. And there wasn't really a whole lot of things to do with it other than sanding a bunch of hours, of course. Right off the flattening station, or whatever you want to call it, it leaves very visible lines. And so I would just start off with using a 100 grit on the Festool Rotex in Rotex mode. That just makes super quick work getting rid of the lines left by the cutter. And once that was done, It's just a matter of being very patient and sanding for a bunch of hours, just moving up through the grits. Here I'm using oh, what's it called? I keep forgetting the name. It's Mirka or Mirka. I don't know how you pronounce it, but it's a very good sander. I'm super impressed by it, and it's very comfortable to use as well. So after many hours of sanding, sometimes with other sanders that I've used in the past, my hand would feel very like numb almost from all the vibrations, but with this sander I could just sand for hours straight and my hands would feel fine, so that was very positive experience. And the only method that I adhere to when sanding is just making sure that I keep making pencil lines in between each grit change, and just make sure I get all of the pencil lines completely off before I move up to the next grit. And I also do this little trick where I turn off all the lights in the workshop, and this only works when it's dark, but you need a very bright light and just shine it at like different angles, and sometimes you'll be able to pick up little sanding swirls and any unevenness in the surface that would look horrible once the finish is on. And so you're able to spot those beforehand, and this gives you a much higher chance of a successful finish. And once the sanding is done, then comes the final wonderful moment of putting on the finish. And so I'm using a Rubio Monaco charcoal. I'm using the charcoal because the client was a bit worried that the wood, the natural look of the wood, if I was just to use a natural finish without any pigments, would make it a bit too red for their living space. And so the charcoal got rid of some of that red and gave it a more of a deep brown look. And the Sapelli, the grain is just the chatoyance or the vibrance or whatever you want to call it. It's like it's got of a three-dimensional look to it. So, which is when you're looking at it from a different angle, it appears to move a little bit, almost like curly grain would. But this is more of a uniformity, whereas with like curly maple or birch, it's more of a across the grain, but with the Sapelli it's more of along the grain kind of thing. So it was just very, very gorgeous. Here are some pictures of the final piece taken the next day in proper daylight. It just turned out super well, and the clients also, they were very happy with the look of the table. At the end of the day, that's all that counts, really. It's a wonderful thing to have the opportunity to make products like these and have people buy them and be happy with them. That's the most important thing. I'm very thankful for that. The final thing we had to do was to put this in a shipping box, and then we put it on a truck headed for Gothenburg, Sweden, and that's the last I saw of that table, other than the pictures they sent me. Yeah, it was a very fun build. So with that, I want to say thank you so much again for watching, and have a very awesome day wherever you may be.